Hey everyone, and welcome to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 4, Episode 5. It's called Remember Me. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. This episode features some time warp shenanigans. Well, maybe not time warp, but bubble warp universe shenanigans, to be more precise, I suppose. Although nothing about that sentence was remotely precise in any way. It was the most hand-wavy nonsense I've ever said.
Yeah, well, it wasn't your finest work.
But yes, so this is a Dr. Beverly Crusher focused episode where she seems to start noticing people disappearing, and not just disappearing as in like they've went missing. That the ship has no record of these people existing. Everyone else doesn't remember they existed, and it starts with one person, one close friend of hers, this old doctor who she trained with, and then starts to sort of grow, and other people start disappearing. Then eventually main characters start disappearing. And then there's a bit of a kind of a swerve about a halfway, maybe 2/3 into the episode, where we kind of reveal what's really going on and what the real crisis is, which is actually not super unpredictable because there's actually a kind of a big thing at the start of everything happening, which calls into question. It was certainly in my head the whole time that the scene that sets everything up does seem to suggest that something happened to her instead of everyone else. But nevertheless, I actually thought it was quite enjoyable, as she is like freaking out at people disappearing. I thought a lot of the scenes in there were quite good, and of course it's ultimately about them trying to rescue her from this essentially little pocket universe that's been created, which, admittedly, I was critiquing Wesley Crusher at one point in this episode before. I mean, he's still responsible for what's happened, and he put his mother in this weird pocket universe. Before then, though, I was actually when the old man disappeared, I did sort of say, that little shit Wesley Crusher's are raising people from the timeline. He has to be stopped. What is this? What is this nonsense? Anyway, how did you feel about Remember Me?
I thought it was okay. There are definitely things I like in there, but I thought it went too long before it revealed what was actually going on because, I'd got there quite a while before because, like you say, there was the inciting incident, which made it kind of predictable in a lot of ways. And it was frustrating to not see any of the characters kind of get to that. And I know that there's kind of a reason in the story as to why, but I still felt like it went too long hiding it from the audience so that when it revealed, it was like, aha, gotcha. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure you did. And I don't know, there was a good maybe 10 minutes before that where I'm just kind of waiting for it to reveal now so we can do the other side of it, and it was just taking too long to get there. Kind of killed a lot of my enthusiasm in that period for me.
Yeah, I don't know if it's supposed to be a gotcha, especially like I say, it's made very clear. There's this moment where the bubble is created, where we actually see it from Wesley's point of view, where his mother's disappeared, and he just sort of takes it as, oh, she must have left when I wasn't looking, no big deal. And then we go to Crusher and we see her kind of discover the old man's disappeared, and it progresses from there until, of course, it eventually reveals that she's in her own little universe, and we see the others trying to like rescue her and bring her back. I suppose I agree a little bit that maybe it's not so much that I think it goes on too long necessarily. I think it's fine to sort of make the main focus of the episode be in the bubble and be with her, and kind of have us sort of guessing what's really going on here, what's happening. If I have a critique, it's that maybe by the point where everyone's disappeared and it's just Picard, it goes to this point where, okay, clearly her world's not the real one. Because even though I suspected there's something actually else going on, I never necessarily got to the point where I was thinking, oh, it's definitely like, this is all fake and it's all just in her head, or it's all something else, or whatever it may be. But once we got to the point where she's on the ship alone, and she's trying to figure things out, or she walks onto the bridge and it's just Picard, and Picard's not really acknowledging that there should be other people here. He doesn't think it's weird that there's no one, and I get that it's part of the universe and it's kind of their thing. Because for me, one of the interesting elements when she started noticing people were disappearing, other than the one person, because for a while it's just the mystery of this one person's disappeared, like what's happened to him. There's no record of him being there. Data can't find any evidence that he ever worked for Starfleet, or he was ever on the station they came from at the start of the episode, or anything like that. And there's a couple of moments where, like, when they go to O'Brien and he's like, yeah, I was here. I was the one, transporting people on during that time period. And yeah, no, I didn't see any old man. And, Beverly did come in and sort of said thanks for something and left. It was kind of weird, actually. And there's a moment where Riker kind of looks at her and I'm like, oh, they're going down the path here where they're starting to suspect that maybe Crusher is losing it and there's something wrong with her. But then other people started disappearing, right? A couple of our medical staff disappeared, and then the whole medical staff disappeared. And for me, what I thought was kind of exciting about some of this stuff was the idea that she could effectively convince them that something was going wrong because it made no sense there was no medical staff. Like, there was it's almost like she was starting to point out plot holes in the universe. Like, this doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't there be a medical staff? I can't be, just here. But then they counteract with, well, we're not a ship of 1,000 people. We're a ship of 200 people. And she's like, wait, what? And it's like, 800 people have disappeared. And I thought that back and forth, that kind of like try to find the truth, was interesting to me.
It was, to a point. I think it did it too many times for me, because it was just like, this repeated countdown. And eventually it started doing it with characters that we know. Like, I think Worf was the first one.
Yeah, she's like, or not she, but obviously whoever she's talking to is like, who's that? What? Who's this Worf?
Yeah.
I thought obviously Crusher doesn't necessarily get a whole lot of like, focused time like a lot of the other characters do. I did like her delivery of this questioning about Worf when she's kind of like, the big guy who never smiles, the Klingon.
Yeah.
I liked her delivery of that stuff.
No, I did too. I think she does quite good, which is important, in her own episode, which can't necessarily be said for all of the cast in their episodes.
Oh, sure.
So, it has that going for it.
You leave Deanna Troi alone.
Yeah. I named no names. Yeah, you drew those conclusions yourself.
Mm-hmm.
No, I do like that part of it, though, the kind of the countdown. But I think it was at that point where I was also kind of feeling where it's like, okay, they're accepting that there is something going on, which, again, I liked that she kind of says to Picard, hey, you got to just trust me on this. And he does. Even till right till the end where it's just the two of them and he starts doubting.
That might be my favourite scene of the episode, actually, is where she says we have to go back to the space station, and I know that there's nothing I can prove here. You're just going to have to take me at my word that we have to go back, there's something wrong. And he immediately just, contacts Riker and says, turn the ship around, we're going back to the space station, and just says, your word's always been enough. Like, I thought that was maybe my favourite scene of the episode, because it was just this moment of trust between them that...
I think it was actually a really strong moment, because it was in the same scene, I believe, where he was questioning her sanity as well. It's like, have you checked yourself? Have you considered your mental health? Have you given yourself a physical check that there's nothing affecting you? And she says there's nothing, but it's clearly, both of them are aware of the possibility. And I like that even with that context, he's still like, I'm going to trust you enough that I'm not going to take the risk. I did like that, but it was around this kind of point where I'm feeling, okay, they're aware that it could be her. There's something there, but she was in the room when the bubble happened, and they never address that. And maybe it was something that she's the only one that can remember. Maybe and they're so sure immediately that it's something to do with this bubble, but they don't quite make the link. And I know you can explain it because it's her delusion. She can't. I think the way that it's put later on in the real world is, as long as she thinks she's alive, and she can't break that delusion and ruin it for herself, I guess. But
one of the things I was thinking about early on in the episode actually is obviously still thinking that she was clearly the sick, because they kept saying like, well, if this bubble was created, because they talk about the bubble and they talk about, well, the old man wasn't anywhere near here, and then they talk about the once some more people disappear, like, well, they weren't necessarily, these are different parts of the ship, nothing makes sense. Picard speculates, could this bubble be like going around the ship somehow? And I actually thought at this point, rather than her being on her own universe, that Crusher herself, because everyone, at least to begin with, before we started talking about the big numbers, it was like people that were close to her in some way who were disappearing, and I thought she was the cause, well, not the cause, but you know what I mean, like whatever it was, yeah, she was carrying this thing around the ship. And obviously by the time it's like hundreds of people are going, and it's not the people she's close to, that went out the window, because I was expecting them to get to a revelation where Wesley eventually went, hey, you were here.
That was what bugged me. And again, I know by the end, okay, I understand why she didn't get to that in this version of her world. but watching it was frustrating. Just kind of waiting for this revelation for it to realize, oh, it was her, and it took too long to get there for me, and it kind of killed the pacing of the episode for me.
Yeah, I wasn't as frustrated. Like there's a real negative spin on this from you, and I feel like I was into a lot of this stuff, and then I was very much into the scene where Wesley disappeared. Actually, I thought that was very well done, where she rushes down because she realizes that Wesley might have disappeared, and she runs down into the engineering deck because he's been down there tinkering with this experiment he was running, and she's like relieved when she sees him. It's this sort of relief moment, and it's like, I mean, it's hard to relate being relieved to see Wesley Crusher, but it makes sense from the context. And then I love the way she's just talking to him, and she's walking out the room, and he's just not there on the other side of the door. And she finishes her sentence and turns around. I thought that was really well handled. So, well, I kind of agree that it maybe goes a little bit too long in this middle part of the episode. I don't actually think there's that much time where I felt that. It's like there's very little I would actually do to take it down, I guess.
Fair enough. I think for me, I would cut out a few of the repetitions of just the large numbers being dwindled. It felt like we did it, once or twice too many times. And then, as I think we do need something in that time instead with her considering that it was her. I mean, it doesn't have to get to the actual answer, but just something, that it's from her perspective, that this is kind of being weird.
I wouldn't be opposed to a scene like that. But even when she was on her own, I liked that she was essentially doing the same thing with the computer, where she was trying to like point out plot holes. Like, wait, why am I the only person on the ship? You're saying I've always been the only crew member on the ship. What is the purpose of this ship? And the computer answers, explore the galaxy, blah blah. It's just like, well, am I qualified to do all of that on my own? It's like, no, you are not. Well, explain to me, why am I the only one here?
She's doing that throughout. Like, I think there's a point where there's only like 100 odd of them, and she's trying to convince Jean-Luc. She's like, "This is weird," and he's like, "That's not weird. So it's always been this many." It's like, then why have we got so many rooms? They're like, foreign dignitaries, evacuations. The usual pizzazz. Yeah,
that's where there's a slight shift for me, and not in a bad way necessarily, but up until that point, it felt like she was using the plot holes, and it was convincing them there was something wrong. Once that many people were disappearing, though, and even Picard had like an answer for it. Like, it clearly, every time people are disappearing, like these, I guess essentially fake versions of the characters are not real per se, but they're all based on the real versions. And I like the idea that if these versions all came from the mind of Crusher in some way, and the episode never actually says that it does, I don't think.
No, it does.
Does it?
When we get
okay, fair enough.
It's all within her thoughts. It says.
Right. So I like the idea that in her head, to go back to the scene where Picard trusts her word, that she believes Picard would trust him. So it doesn't actually take away from the beauty of the scene. It actually still works. Arguably even better that this is how she perceives her relationship with Picard.
I think it would have been, in this context, interesting either way, if he did trust her or not, because it all comes down to how she views them subconsciously, right?
Yeah.
And she thinks pretty well of most of them, it would seem. And I think mostly it felt in character and right. I think Picard, in the real world scenario, would take her word on it.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't doubt it. But I think it adds an interesting layer to it, an interesting spin on it. And what was already a good scene. And she even brings up the Traveler back from season 1. This was like in the first 5 or 6 episodes. We had this episode where this alien being the one that basically said Wesley was a wunderkind and was going to be the chosen one or some nonsense like that.
Yeah, we always need to be reminded of this stuff, don't we?
And she actually tries to direct the ship to the planet where this guy comes from, but it's when we actually come into because there's a couple of times where she's almost sucked into a vortex, and and I think in the context of the episode we're thinking that's how people are disappearing, is they're getting sucked out of this vortex. But in reality, what's happening is this is actually on the real world. They're trying to reach her and bring her out, and she keeps holding on to things and not going. I
actually really didn't like this effect either. Just it looked kind of hokey. Especially that first time where it showed up from her perspective. It's all the wind machines, the blue light. It kind of, again, it was one of those bits that just took me out of it a little bit, and it's what makes this episode a little bit frustrating for me, because there are a lot of things I like, but there are just enough things that frustrate me or take me out of the moment that kind of ruin the episode a little bit for me and make it not not properly enjoyable like I feel like it should be if you just described the beats to me.
I can't say I felt any particular feelings towards the effect of the vortex.
That's understandable. This is probably just a me nitpicking complaint.
It never even. I mean, it didn't stand out as notably good either, but it never stood out. Like I never even thought about it. It was never like, oh, something's off here. What's going on?
Me getting hung up on small details is hardly new for this series, is it?
But once we come out to the real world and try to solve it, the Traveller does show up and they have the actor back, and he's like, "Oh, Wesley, it's not just math. You have to also use your feelings or blah blah blah." It's a bit wishy washy, but I like Crusher kind of figuring out what they were trying to do. Like she figured out herself what the vortexes were that they're trying to reach her, and we get to a point where the bubble's kind of like shrinking and it's actually starting to just like cut into the ship essentially. And she's, minutes are left. We've got the ticking time clock bomb sort of effect, and it's counting down. And they're trying to bring her back. And all this stuff I thought worked well. When it went back to the real world, and they're trying, and I think what I really like about this concept of an episode is that normally this episode would be done in one of two ways. You'd either have the point of view of both sides of the issue, right? Where the original series had this a lot. We'd have a character say trapped, like Sulu trapped in the planet, and them up on the ship trying to get him back. So we'd see how he's sort of struggling, but it would be more focused on the people trying to fix the issue. Or alternatively, you wouldn't see the person at all, and it would all be the people trying to save them. I think I like that this focuses on her, and when we cut back to the real world, they already know where she is. They've already figured out what's going on to a fairly large extent. We're like, oh, we're trying to get her back, and she's, this is a second attempt, and it's failed.
We missed all the boring bit, is what you're saying.
But I like that. I like that we tackle it from a different perspective. It's actually funny because I've been reviewing the new Twilight Zone with Tara, and recently on the Ace, I think on Edge of Tomorrow, I pondered the idea, wouldn't it be cool to get a time loop story where instead of from the perspective of the person who's looping, we actually follow someone who's just the person who's not looping, and we watch it from their reaction and find out someone else is looping. And it just so happened that like a month later, one of these new Twilight Zone episodes did that concept, and I feel like this
was
is
any good.
Do you know what? It was actually really good. It was easily the best episode of the entire show.
Whoa! The new Twilight Zone has a good episode.
Has a good episode. It has one decent episode and then one really good episode. And the finale was garbage. But
not enough to make me want to watch it.
No, but
good to know.
But I feel like this is kind of a similar thing with a different concept. Is that it's giving me the perception of someone else that's focusing on the other character, and then we, at least in the way Star Trek usually tackles these things. Obviously,
yeah. I was gonna say, in general, it's not that novel, but I think for Star Trek, it feels different.
Yeah. Especially in the sense that we don't see anything from them until we cut into most other things. It'll still focus maybe on the person who survived, like the Martian, for example. Just the first thing that popped in my head. Right, we see the other people on the ship and making their choice to come back, but we focus primarily on Matt Damon. It's not. It's his story. We focus on him, and we see the other people every so often popping enough. This doesn't do that. This is more like. I mean, I suppose technically in that movie, and probably the book as well, I assume, it does wait a while before we cut to them, because we stick with him until...
But in context of this is, 2/3, maybe 3/4 through the episode before we cut back. It's not that far into that movie.
I think the notable thing in that movie as well is that when we do cut to them, it may be after he's made contact for the first time, or at least when someone finds out that he's actually still alive. But all of the decision making and the planning of how to save him, we see all of that, right? We see from that point on. In this, the characters have already. This would be like if in The Martian we didn't see them until they're basically arriving back at Mars.
Yeah, they've done all the failed attempts. They've just got the good attempt to go for it, basically.
Yeah, the last ditch effort. Do you know what made me laugh though when she did sort of go through the vortex and kind of came out into the real world? Is that she sees the Traveller, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's you." I laughed out loud because on the other side of the table, because him and Wesley were sort of standing there with their eyes shut, like tapping buttons and whatnot. At the other side of the table, Wesley is like he's got on his knees and he's like his head's like on the table and he's kind of like sprawled across it. And I'm like, I get that you're surprised to see the Traveller, But your son
But-
looks like he's dying on the other side of it, and he's fine. He gets up like a minute later. It's fine. But
and she did just have like a whole big emotional thing
I know.
where she lost him.
I know. I just thought it was weird that she ignored the fact that her son looked like he was like half passed out on the table.
Yeah.
It was like, hey,
Little bit
traveler.
Yeah.
But then again, this I can relate to. Not caring about Wesley Crusher. This is the
Makes
the
sense,
emotion I
yeah.
can relate to in the episode.
I agree.
Yeah, and it basically ends there. She hugs Wesley, and they're happy she's back. I thought it was a solid episode. I kind of get your complaints. I agree with some of them to an extent, but I think I came out of this one a bit more in the positive end because it's a spin on an old. The actual story itself it's not a spin necessarily, but the way Star Trek tackles these types of stories is a spin, and then nice for Crusher to get a bit of focus for a change, and it'd be good. I guess.
No, I think it's funny because I think I agree with almost everything positive you've said. For the most part, maybe one or two little bits, but like I said, there is a lot I do like in here. There's just a couple of things that kind of take me out of the episode and ruin my enjoyment overall. Even though fundamentally I think it's quite good at its core. Just a couple of things that ruin it for me. But I can see why a lot of people would like this.
Another nice touch I like is that the opening scene where she meets her old friend, who's his wife died recently, and he doesn't want to live where they lived, in the station because it remains him too much for her. So this is a thing you hear about a lot. Is an old person when their spouse dies, they want to move somewhere else just for a change. So it's a different, kind of a.
Another common one is they redecorate entirely,
sure,
so it feels different.
It's the cheaper version of relocating.
Yeah.
But it's just a fresh start kind of thing. But they're talking about losing people around them. I thought it did a really nice job thematically of setting up essentially what's going to happen to her in this bubble where she starts losing everyone in her life. Like everyone starts to go.
Yeah, I think in that context, I would have liked a bit more time of her on her own at the end, on the ship after everyone's gone, with her dwelling on the fact that she's lost everyone.
She does make that nice speech though of remembering them, and they deserve better than this to just be like wiped out and not be forgotten.
She does. I think it's especially true with the Wesley stuff. Like it's great in that moment. Don't get me wrong, but very quickly she has to move on to just the next part of the crisis, and there's not much more there. So I feel like we could have done more with the actual mourning of it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess because they disappear in such mysterious circumstances, she's assuming there's a way she can get them back. She's assuming that there's something weird going on that she can fix. It's not just dying. It's not like they're all just dying or getting shot in front of her. It's...
No, I get that, but maybe just her contemplating what if this is it, and kind of having just some extra time to reflect on that. I think might have been something.
I don't disagree. I think that beat in there before she started to realize that this wasn't the real world. That when she got to that point. There's somewhere in there, maybe that did a good beat. But
it's definitely not a bad episode though. Despite my nitpicks and how negative I sounded at points, it's far from a bad episode.
All right. So we'll look ahead at what next week's is going to be. Next episode is called Legacy, and here's the description on IMDb. The crew of the Enterprise enters into orbit around the home planet of their former crewmate, Tasha Yar, where they encounter her sister. Is
this sister conveniently played by the same actress?
No, there's a bunch of images on IMDb. It doesn't look like her.
Okay. Wouldn't be the first show that's pulled that.
Ishara Yar.
Parents real inventive with the name in there.
She looks vaguely familiar. What have I seen her in? She was in Scream 3.
It's okay.
Female caller? Oh, she must have just been a voice on a phone. Okay, clearly she's got many claims to fame in her time.
Maybe she's just one of those faces that you've seen in a lot of tiny, small roles.
She may have been on a couple of TV shows or something, I don't know. But hey-ho, so that's next episode. And I don't want to make any promises, but there's a chance that you may be getting 2 of these a week for a little while over the next little period.
It depends on some upcoming shows and how we feel on those. But it is possible we will get some more of these kind of done. Yeah,
it's possible there might be a slightly increased schedule for a little bit, but at the very least, you'll definitely get one next week, obviously. So That is episode 5 of season 4. So let us know what you think of the episode in the comments below. Please do like is super important on YouTube. It is a nice, free, and easy way to support us. You can support us financially, though, of course, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles. Otherwise, get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Keep watching Star Trek. And remember, when it comes to the ladies, and apparently trapping his mother in a bubble where she might be a victim of her own thinking and demise, Wesley Crusher is in complete... That's not true. He wasn't in control at all. He was fumbling about. He needs the alien to come and help him. He's useless. Wesley Crusher's useless. He's a little prick who can't do anything right.